Hello and welcome to this pit stop for Viking Age expansion, an expansion for 878 Vikings Invasions of England. This expansion was designed by Gunter Eichhardt and published by Academy Games. Now, Viking Age expansion contains 9 different modules you can add into as you wish 878 Vikings. Now, I'm going to go through them quickly, starting with its War of God and Land. That brings in churches, which the English player must put out, there's 14 of them, into the shires across the board. If a Viking player wins a battle and conquers a shire with a church in it, flips over to pillage side, and the English player takes that token, they can spend it to raise more food during a battle. However, if the Viking player destroys all 14 churches at any point, that is an instant win for them, and paganism takes over the country. If, however, when the Treaty of Wedmore is enacted, there are any churches left, Christianity holds on, and no matter what happens in the battles, eventually it will convert the Vikings, and the English will consider that a victory. Also, as part of that, Vikings can sacrifice 2 units and build a settlement in a shire, and that counts as control now, and they can let the units wander off, and it has its own defense value. And they can also then upgrade that into an actual Viking settlement from a fort, and that not only has its own defense but also generates reinforcements similarly to the way that English get during their reinforcement phases. That is module 1. In module 2, the 4 different kingdoms on the board come into play, and they start off with the English in control of all of them, and they give special powers. For example, in East Anglia, the English troops can move into swamp areas now, and the Vikings can't follow them. They can build up there and move out again. However, each of the kingdoms has got a number of city shires which the Vikings must conquer in order to take control of that kingdom and get a special power. In this case, if they take East Anglia, the English can no longer go into swamps, and both Viking factions get a hand size off 4 cards rather than 3, which is very handy for them. The third module is kings. There are 4 kings that come. Now, they're all English kings, however they get shuffled up and they get dealt once per faction. Accounting for traitors, basically, that go across and work for the Vikings. And when you look at these, for example, King Edmund of East Anglia, during all battles this turn, you must reroll all fleet and command results once. You can't reroll a second time. Or King Aylor of Northumbria can look at an opposing faction's hand of cards and can sacrifice that card in order to take that hand of cards and use them as their own, including the Treaty of Wedmore card. That could be quite powerful. Expansion 4 is the Runes and Prayers expansion, and that brings special dice into play. At the beginning of battles, factions can choose to roll the dice off their faction. If your Vikings get to roll rune dice. Now, that's great if you roll lots and lots of runes, because you can spend those for Omens of Victory, which lets you re-roll dice, or for Battle Rage, which you can turn Norseman units into Berserk units. However, they can roll these faithful signs, and they will actually go onto the English prayer card, and they'll be looking to roll those along with these crosses, and they can generate power both from the Viking and from their own dice. For example, ignore 1 Feared Flea by spending 1 of these crosses, or convert a Norseman into a Thane using these 2 symbols here. However, if they roll martyrdom dice, they have to ignore all command rolls for this particular next battle dice roll, and that gets spent away. So it's kind of a risky thing where you can invoke powerful things, but you can also help the other faction if you're unlucky with your rolls. The 5th expansion module is Relics and Holy Sites. Now, that gives English the access to holy sites. For example, here we've got King Edward's Martyrdom in Theodford, and that lets players use feared cards when they're attacking. Or you've got the Linen Clothes of St. Elfrith. I hope that doesn't sound like I'm reading it. And that lets you use command results to move 2 units rather than 1. And as well as having these holy sites which are stuck on the board, and the Vikings can take control of them. If they take control, they cancel these powers, but they don't get any special power for doing it. The first couple of Viking invading leaders, they can also draw relics, and they come from a different stack of tokens. They might have Thor's armband, for example. Again, that will give them access to thirds when they're having battles. Or the Volva will let them look at the turn order cubes and rearrange them from each order, as long as this is in play and that leader has not been defeated, which sounds very powerful to me. And there's a bunch of those to draw from, and you only use 4 in each game. The 6th expansion is the Legends expansion. Now, each time a Viking leader comes and invades, they get to draw a legend card from this stack. And that gives them something they're attempting to achieve, which will help them score points. For example, Valhalla's Glory, 8 or more Viking units die in a single battle. If they achieve that, they can turn it over as long as that leader is still alive, and that will score them an extra point that will come off the board like that. This Alliance Forger, having 3 Viking leaders are on the map at the same time at the end of a round, again, that will score them extra points. Luckily for the English, they have their own deck of legend cards, which they can draw from once per turn. They can only ever have one awaiting completion. But obviously, once they've completed that, they can move on and complete others. For example, foil plans, a Viking faction wins no battle, and there are extra score tokens now, and they'll go back on the board, adding the backwards and forwards of the scoring, or the defender of the people. No further killed in a battle that begins with at least 4 food. And again, you can add them back on there and prevent the Vikings from claiming such a quick victory. So we're talking about third. We can also mess with the third deck. These are epic battle cards, and they get mixed into the third deck, and when you pull them, when you're doing a third, they're going to affect the battle they're taking part of. You will still get a normal third card every time. For example, in the epic battle, begin with the defenders. Each faction may move any number of units from adjacent shires into this battle to make it bigger. Or traitors, the attackers must choose one of their 2 factions, and that faction now acts for the defenders for the rest of this battle, and there's a bunch of them to mix things up as well. The 8th and penultimate one is Viking ships, and there are 7 of them. Each time a Viking leader comes on an invasion, they leave a ship behind them. That will control the shire where they've landed without having to use units there, although any one English unit can just march in there and instantly burn it and get rid of it. And also, Viking leaders, for one move, can go between their Viking ships and be much quicker up and down the coast. The final module we've got are 2 extra leaders that come into play. We've got Ragnar Lodbrok. Now, he's going to replace the first Viking leader, and he's got a slightly smaller horde, but on the first battle each turn that he's involved with, all command roles for the opposition actually become flee, and it kind of represents the shock of this first invasion. And the last part of the expansion is the extra leader Lagata. Now, she comes in with any other invasion that the Viking players choose, and you can split the forces. She comes with a couple of troops, but you can split the forces from the other leader and then do a 2-pronged attack rather than being predictable in where you go. Those are all 9 modules for the Viking Age expansion for 878 Vikings Invasions of England. If you enjoyed this and want to see more videos, please check out the Game Pit channel on YouTube. For more in-depth coverage of gaming, please find the Game Pit podcast. Thank you very much.